So today's topic is integrated pest management. Probably by the end of this discussion, you will have an idea what integrated pest management is all about. So what is integrated pest management? We are going to use the definition by somebody known as Tweed in 1979. The integrated pest management was defined as the use of multiple control measures which are compatible, economical, environmentally sound, and culturally feasible for managing pest populations at an acceptable level. That was the definition given, but it doesn't mean that we should memorize it. You can see I have put it in quotes. By the end of the day, you should define in your own way, the way you understand integrated pest management, and I hope by the end of this lecture, you will be in a position to have an idea of what it is, what we call pest management. So, why is IPM important or pest management important? If we look at the global situation, we see that the population is rising, and therefore there is a big demand for food. This means that farmers should have to increase. Sorry about that. Hello. Yeah, put it right. All right. So the farmers have to increase the yields so that they can match the increasing population. But we have some constraints within the system. We have got pests, and at the same time, whilst we are increasing the yields, we should not damage the environment. We need to protect the farming environment or protecting biodiversity. This is why IPM can be important in this system. Now IPM provides farmers with tools and strategies to maximize production sustainably without damaging the environment, and also to minimize losses due to insects, weeds, and diseases. So the idea is to control these pests, but at the same time, we should not harm the environment. Because if we harm the environment, it means we will fail to produce food in the long run. So please remember that when we talk about integrated pest management, there are three components or three pillars which we should remember. Once we talk about IPM, please note that we are only not talking about the intervention where we are integrating different methods of control so as to minimize probably pesticide use and so forth. The first thing we have to remember is that prevention. We should aim to prevent the pests from building up in the farming system. So the first pillar is prevention. We should minimize the build-up of pests. That is number one. If you are asked something on IPM, please remember that you start with prevention as one of the key areas. The second area is that of monitoring. We should monitor crops for both pests and natural control mechanisms. In other words, we should be able to identify these pests. We should also be able to identify beneficial insects in the ecosystem where we are growing our crops. Now, monitoring will give us information whether to control the pest or not. Probably the pest is not reaching the critical point where it can be harmful. Probably it is under the control of natural enemies. And we want to promote that before we take any action. But if from our monitoring we find that the pest levels is now gone beyond what we call the threshold. Remember, we spent a lot of time talking about monitoring in the past 3 lectures. So we won't spend too much time. I'm assuming that we now know what is monitoring and all of these details. Now, when we have a pest which now requires control, this is the third pillar, or the third important action which we need to take. This is where we are going to use a lot of interventions. It could be various control methods, be it chemical, biological control methods. It may be physical, and so on. And we can integrate these control methods so that we reduce the costs. And sometimes when we talk about IPM, or when you ask people about IPM, they just focus on intervention, integrating control methods, and ignore prevention and monitoring, which are also key components. So in this lecture, What we are just going to talk about are three sections: prevention, monitoring, and intervention. Probably you may find it depends on the section. One of the sections could be longer than the other one. And we will use examples to demonstrate what it is which we call prevention, monitoring, and intervention. And when you are faced with such probably a person which addresses IPM, you are not really forced to write all the details. Try to give us the principles. Do you know prevention? What are the examples? Do you know monitoring? Do you know what is done during monitoring? Intervention. Do you know what is actually involved in intervention? Remember, you are not focused on one pest. You are dealing with weeds, diseases, or insect pests. So, in a way, it could be a general response to all of these pests. So, let us look at prevention. What sort of things can we do to prevent pests from building up? Here I've got an example of bollworms. Now with the red bollworm in cotton, we can reduce the incidence by probably manipulating the planting dates. We now know that there is a dead period which we should respect in cotton, where we should slash all our cotton plants so that we minimize build-up of the red bollworm or these bollworms. And in fact, we do have an act to this which enforces farmers to comply with this dead period. And after the dead period, there are certain planting dates which are recommended. This is meant to reduce the build-up of these pests, although we have an arsenal of insecticides which we can buy, but at least we try to minimize this problem. So we have the Plant Pests and Disease Cotton Amendment Regulation 1988, which enforces the creation of a dead period or a closed season by cotton growers, during which all cotton plants and or stocks are destroyed so as to prevent probably the build-up of the pink bollworm, the Pectinophora gospiera population build-up and carryover. So it's one of the prevention methods. Manipulating the planting dates and respecting the dead period or the closed season in cotton. Of course, with other crops, this can differ. They have other things as well. We also have what is known as trap cropping. Trap cropping and planting diversionary hosts have been widely applied and recommended in the past. Now we can, in the case of cotton, have other crops which can divert the insect pests. For example, maize, and sorghum. But probably the period may not be sustainable in cotton. But of course, sorghum, maize, and cowpea could be good trap crops for the African bollworm. These are the most preferred crops for oviposition and larval development. So if you are growing cotton and you have also sorghums, maize, and cowpeas within the area, you can also divert these insect pests. We also use trap cropping if we've got striga problems. We can plant cowpeas, soybean, groundnut, and bambara nut, so that these crops will facilitate the germination of striga seeds, but will prevent the attachment to the roots, which means the life cycle of the striga species is broken. Still on prevention, we can also use crop varieties with either resistance or tolerance to pests, which can be grown. It is one of the most important factors in integrated pest management. In cotton, hairiness is a major factor for resistance against the sucking insect complex of cotton. So cotton varieties resistant to lepidoran pests are hard to come about, but at least we should try to find these varieties so that we can use them. It could be a different situation altogether, not only cotton, but different crops which may require resistant or tolerant genotypes. Now on crop varieties, for example, talking about Striga asiatica, there is this sorghum genotype SAR29, which was found to be resistant to Striga asiatica. Now, in maize, IITA developed a line, ZD005, with resistance to Striga asiatica and Striga emontica. Probably you may be interested to know that in our department we have utilized the ZD05 so that maize hybrids with the resistance or tolerance to Striga could be developed. And in fact, Professor Gasura has actually developed some materials which are resistant to Striga asiatica and also tolerant to the Striga asiatica. There are maize genotypes which are resistant to grey leaf spot and the maize streak virus, which can also be grown. Koga in 2011 proposed that the tobacco varieties T61 and KRK26 were actually tolerant to Striga gesneroids. I think within this department we have also some varieties which were developed with resistance to fall armyworm. And actually this season they have been tried in Mutoko and Murewa. The seed was actually supplied to farmers to try it. But of course we had this drought, but in some areas I think the maize could be harvested. We also have this BT cotton. Remember, we are just talking about preventive measures which can actually reduce the build-up of these pests, because that is the starting point. Another example is the BT cotton. Bacillus thuringiensis BT are resistant to a number of lepidopteran bollworm pests of cotton. So we now have what is known as BT cotton with this gene from Bacillus, which can be used the same way as a host plant resistant variety derived from conventional breeding programs. Adoption of BT varieties is not knowledge intensive, so smallholder farmers can actually grow them with ease. Like conventional host plant resistant varieties, BT cotton is compatible with most IPM tactics. You may be interested to know that the toxins such as CRY1AC, CRY2AB, and VIP3A produced by BT cotton varieties are only ingested by the phytophagous insects. So if the insect tries to eat the cotton, it will die because of these toxins, because the cotton plant will start producing these toxins. At a later stage, maybe I will explain how BT genes end up in cotton. Crop rotations can also minimize the load of pests in our fields. So crop rotations could break the life cycles of the pests. This could reduce crop pest populations, which we want. So crop rotation is effective on red and pink bollworm, which have narrow host ranges. African and spiny bollworms are polyphagous, so will not be affected by rotations. So there are some pests which are not affected. Rotations can break crop disease life cycles. This paper by Mapuranga, I think I sent one to you. If you have got time, you may have to read it. Probably it may make you remember some of these things. Intercropping. So intercropping has been used, or has got a potential to decrease striga infestation in maize. So two crops are grown in the same field, for example, maize and cowpea. This could promote natural enemies for insect pests as well. Maize intercropped with cowpeas actually reduced the striker infestation, according to Kasembe et al., 1998. In Kenya, Khan et al. Found that intercropping maize with Desmodium cynatum greatly reduced Striga haemonthica in Kenya. So intercropping could actually disrupt disease epidemiology. Probably you may be interested to note that we've got 2 DPhil students here in the department who are doing their work in Murewa and Mutoko, focusing on evaluating intercropping. One is looking at the impact of intercropping on the general weeds, and possibly also including Striga asiatica. But we have noted that intercropping could also reduce in fact, it can keep weeds below the threshold. Even if they are there, they won't exceed that threshold. And as a result, you can have maximum yield where this intercropping is being practiced. But of course, if you compare yields from intercropping to pure stands, the pure stands tend to have a slight increase in terms of yield. But that slight increase in yield probably under typical farming conditions it may not be obtained because of late weeding, which is common in smallholder farming areas. And another thing is that intercropping will ensure that the farmer may also have cowpea, which is a source of protein, thus ensuring also a balanced diet. With that digression, I just wanted to show you that there's a lot of interest really on the use of intercropping as a tool to minimize weeds. The other student is also using intercropping to minimize the impact of insect pests in the same area, as well as diseases, because intercropping can also reduce them. So the 2 DPhil students are working on these issues which we are talking about. Deep plowing is also another intervention. It's part of the land preparation. Now, if it is done in a cotton field, it can expose bollworm pupa to be picked by birds, and also it can be exposed to excessive sun heat, which will kill it. So the importance of plowing cotton stubble to reduce overwintering populations of African bollworm was emphasized by Fitt and Forrester, who thought it was, a good thing. The post-harvest cultivations could destroy the pupa of bollworms, and this has received considerable attention in Zimbabwe. But of course, you should know that on the one hand, we are also promoting Fumvudza no tillage systems, because they also have certain benefits. But probably the downside could be the perpetuation of these bollworms. Now, harvesting and storage. Carryover of weed seeds and disease-causing organisms can be reduced with good harvesting, so that we really need to clean our seed and have good storage facilities which prevent accumulation of these diseases or weed seeds. The other issue is that as we control our pests, remember we also were aiming at reducing, or we are trying to prevent a build-up of these pests in our fields. One of the issues is we should preserve biodiversity. We should protect natural habitats near our farmland as a way of conserving biodiversity. Probably we could also protect, many natural pest enemies. So careful management of farmland edges, including trees, hedges, is important for wildlife habitats, providing cover and refuge for beneficial insects and animals. So sometimes within the cropping systems, we should leave some patches, probably along condor ridges, so that beneficial insects can form a habitat there. We have predatory spiders which can eventually help us to control our insect pests. So within our farming systems, we should ensure that we should be protecting some of these natural habitats. For example, we should avoid, unnecessary burning surrounding our fields. So this is it on the preventive methods, how we can prevent these pests. And please, when we ask you about integrated pest management, we are not saying that write everything on preventive methods. You can choose wisely, because you just want to support your argument why preventive methods are important. You are having a lot of pests, weeds, diseases, and insect pests. I haven't actually given an example for verticillium wilt, which I think can also be reduced through practices of rotation, crop rotation in the fields. It also affects this cotton. Now let us look at monitoring. Where we spent yesterday, we were just talking about monitoring and assessing how weeds, insect pests, and pathogens can reduce crop yields. We even talked about some models which can be used. When we are talking about IPM, that knowledge is actually required under monitoring. Although I am not going to go through a lot of it. So it is important to observe crops. You should also decide whether action should be taken to maximize crop production and quality, probably by reducing the presence of the insect pests. So observing crops determines if, when, and what action should be taken to maximize crop production and quality. There are decision-making tools which can range from pegboards for insects, which I showed you, to computers and trained local experts, to remote sensing technologies just for monitoring these pests. You can get real-time information on what is happening in the field, and this should be ideal. Scouting for pests in the cropping fields and assessing of the thresholds for these pests is very important. When I talked about monitoring, I indicated that in Murewa and Mutoko, we have undertaken a monitoring exercise to quantify these pests, the extent to which they are actually damaging crops, which pests are at the top in terms of damage, which need attention. What are the beneficial pests in those areas across 3 agroecological regions: natural region 2, 3, and 4. So we are actually alive to this monitoring. We are actually doing it under field conditions. Early warning systems for cotton bollworms. Now, in this country, we do have early warning systems. Of course, they can be used after doing the exercise of assessing these pests. Light and pheromone trap catches would be used to predict abundance and the outbreaks of these pests. So there are traps which can be used to collect the insects. If the counts exceed a certain number, then we know we are having a problem, and we should be preparing for the control measures. Trapping Helicobacter amigera is useful as a qualitative measure, indicating the start of an infestation of a migratory wave front. So if we have counts of this bollworm, if it exceeds a certain number, it can indicate that probably it's time to spray. Or it can give us an idea of what to look for during scouting. So for monitoring, we are through. The reason why I've made it short is because we had a lot of, we had 3 lectures on monitoring alone. So I had just to summarize it. So the other thing which we have to focus on is intervention. Sometimes I indicated earlier on that if you ask a question on IPM, people will start from intervention. They will forget prevention, they will forget monitoring as part of the system of integrated pest management. So each pillar of integrated pest management has got a role to play. But intervention is what we are now used to. Reducing economically damaging pests to acceptable levels may involve cultural, physical, biological, and chemical control measures, either individually or in combination. Sometimes this is where we advise farmers to integrate the methods so that they can minimize the costs. Costs, benefits, timing, labor force and equipment, as well as economic, environmental and social impacts, all have to be taken into consideration. Yeah, these are some of the things which we think about when we are controlling the pests. Let us look at the cultural and physical methods. This could involve uprooting weeds and removal of diseased crops from the fields. The possibility of integrating cultural techniques with careful use of crop protection products should be explored. So there is a need to use some pesticides within this system. For example, instead of replacing manual weeding entirely with herbicides, mowing may be used in conjunction with them. So we can integrate mechanical and these mechanical methods plus herbicides. I think some farmers do it. And we should promote it. Biological control. This includes introducing beneficial insects or predators, applying microorganisms such as viruses, fungi, bacteria, and using pheromones to lay or attract, trap, and kill or interfere with insects' mating habits. So sometimes we can use pheromones. Bacteria, fungi, nematodes, or viruses have also been mass produced to control some pests. But in our own environment, I think we can promote the build-up of natural enemies. If we can identify them, then they can suppress our pests. The most common and successful use of Bacillus thuringiensis, BT, a naturally occurring bacterium, which has been used to control several important pests, e.g. caterpillar pests in vegetables, vineyards, and orchards. So the BT has been used as a biological control tool. With modern biotechnology, crops like maize, cotton can now express the insect toxin produced by this natural agent, delivering it more effectively. Probably later on in the last lecture, I may have to explore this BT technology. Here we've got predators and the parasitoids which were found in cotton bollworms in Zimbabwe. So on the right, on the left of the table, we have got a common name of the predator or the beneficial insect, and on the extreme right, on the last column, we have got the stage of bollworm life cycle affected by the predator. So you can have the green last week larva can affect eggs, young larva of that pest. You can have spiders also affecting the larva of the bollworm, and so forth. So you may have a closer look at the examples of some of the predators or beneficial insects and what they can affect on the life cycle of the bollworm. We have also the pentatomid bugs, which also feeds on the eggs and the larvae. So indeed we do have some recorded natural enemies by Joa in 1993, which we should promote so that they can actually take control of these pests. Now, use of pheromones. These are like hormones. So we can have selective trapping techniques to monitor the movement of pests or changes in their population during the season. So we can attract these insects using the pheromones and then kill them using the insecticides. The advantage of this technique is that you are not going to use a lot of chemicals because you have got restricted areas where you are going to spray. We can also cause mating disruption that slows population build up to delay or reduce the need for control treatments. So the use of pheromones is also important. Chemical control, I mean, this is where we have experience, because normally this is the quickest way to deal with the insect pests. Otherwise you lose your yield. Chemical crop protection products, pesticides, are biological active chemicals that can control a range of insect, vertebrate pests, diseases, and weeds. And it's one of the most common methods. They are often the most cost-effective way of controlling infestation as part of an IPM strategy. So we can use them strategically within the IPM. IPM strategies and tools. So IPM includes the development and the use of chemical, natural, biological, biotech products for pest control. It may also involve computer-aided sampling, like what we talked about. This is actually part of monitoring. It can also involve very sophisticated and efficient EWS, which are computer. This is EWS. It's the early warning system, which are computer based. Like these are just examples. Fig culture, Empress, which are promoted by FAO. We also have this GPC, grass pest control, which has also been promoted. So some of these tools may actually fall under monitoring, because we check what we have first before we take action. Crop pest modeling, which we talked about, models and conceptual or mathematical devices which aim to simulate natural processes. A pest management tool may, as pest management tools, they are used to predict or establish the optimal tactics required to achieve economic control of that pest within the constraints of the model. So we have these tools before we trigger any control measures. We use these tools just as a way for decision making. Are we going to control or not? Now, we also use what are known as economic thresholds in order to decide when to spray or when to control a pest. So the pest control strategy is implemented when the pest population reach the economic threshold. Once infestation has reached an economic threshold, the point at which the pest population levels cause losses greater than the cost of the controlling of the pest, now this is the time to come in with control measures. So economic thresholds will give us a signal to come in and control the pests. Alternatively, modeling, for example, based on weather conditions, can indicate the need to intervene, like what happens with the diseases. Potato blight, for example, if it reaches a certain threshold, we come in with the fungicides. So the decision to take control measures depend on the economic thresholds. This is actually linked to monitoring. Probably here we can use the example of cotton, where scouting for the insects during the pest scouting is done. When the numbers of natural enemies is high in relation to the pest population, if we find that the natural enemies are exceeding the enemy, the pest, we can decide not to spray, because we don't want it to destroy the natural enemy. And we should have an assurance that they are doing a good job. If we think the crop is at risk, then we come in with the spray. We can also use very selective insecticides, such as acetamiprid, and the restriction of broad spectrum insecticides, so that we don't harm these beneficial insects. The timing of bollworm insecticide sprays is done after pest scouting, to establish the economic threshold values. I think with the Cotton Research Institute, they have the number of eggs or the number of larvae which justifies control. Now, if the economic threshold has been reached, then probably we can come in with our insecticides. So our management should also aim at protecting natural enemies. So conserving natural enemies of pests is a very important part of IPM and help us to prevent pest resurgence. The effect of crop protection products or other interventions on both pests and their natural enemies needs to be considered. If we think our pesticide is going to harm natural enemies, probably we may think ways of managing that pesticide, or actually postpone it. If we think the natural enemies is actually taking care of our pest, or we can actually time product applications to periods when natural enemies are not active. For example, this may help to protect them. Probably you may find that when you have a high population of the pest, probably there's an absence of the natural enemy. So you introduce a chemical so that you eliminate the pest. This will then give chance for the natural enemies to build up, because they will not suffer competition from the natural, from these insect pests, because they also compete. They may also compete with the natural enemies. When we are putting our products, we should select the right products for the job. In developing an IPM program with crop protection products, it is essential to review the product characteristics, applications and costs, then select ones that provide the most cost-effective treatment with minimum undesirable effects. Some products have broad spectrum of activity, while others only target a few types of pests. So selective substances are less likely to affect natural enemies, and we should look for such products. But you may find that these products could also be expensive. Safe and responsible use of products. Every crop protection product should be used according to the manufacturer's recommendations. Normally, if we follow the instructions, maybe we have less problems. If we calibrated our sprayers, are we putting the dosages on the label? These are designed to provide reliable control under normal field conditions. So sometimes, if we follow the proper instructions, probably we have less problems. So we have people applying pesticides. Now, preventing pest resistance to pesticides. All farmers are challenged with the fact that pests adapt to active ingredients and eventually become resistant to them without prevention strategies. But you may find that integrated pest management, or IPM as we are now calling it, offers a range of ways to reduce the risk of resistance developing. So if farmers adopt IPM, we can actually reduce the risk of resistance. And in the long term, it gives us an assurance of keeping on using the same products. Maybe they are cheap, but if we use them without considering some of these things, we may end up not using a product because we will have built a resistant population. So in the long term, it's beneficial. This includes monitoring of pest populations, applying treatments when the economic threshold is reached, and implementing strategies such as alternating or mixing. So IPM actually is good for farmers and the agrochemical industry. Now, plant science industry and IPM. These are now general statements. The global plant science industry has a major role to play in the widespread of adoption of IPM. This may require mutual support, partnerships, and collaboration with governments, non-governmental organizations, and research companies, international, national, and local agricultural associations, crop protection product distributors, dealers, and retailers, and of course farmers themselves. So you can see this may involve a lot of people if it is going to succeed. Here we will give you an example of IPM project in Kenya, which was found to be successful. It's known as the push and pull system. What they are doing there is to grow a legume known as desmodium as an intercrop with maize or with the sorghum. Now sorghum and maize are affected by parasitic weeds, but desmodium can produce some chemicals which interfere with the parasites, and they will fail to attach to the maize. And at the same time, this desmodium can produce some chemicals which can drive away maize stalk borer or stem borer out of the field. And surrounding the maize fields, you have napier grass, which tend to attract the stem borers. So the system is good for the control of stem borers and the striker at the same time. again, it's the same pull and push and pull, if you want to call it. And we have the chemicals which are released, you know. This push-pull strategy was developed over the past 6 years as an integrated approach that simultaneously addresses both of the major problems, maize stalk borer and striker. Push-pull involves trapping stem borers on the highly attractive trap plants, the pull, and the driving them away from the maize crop using repellent intercrops, the push, which is desmodium. So plants which repel stem borers as well as inhibit striker have also been identified. So there's previous work which was done by ECP has shown that plants which can be used as trap or repellent plants are napier grass, Sudani grass, molasses grass, silverleaf desmodium, and greenleaf desmodium. So napier grass and Sudani grass have shown potential for use as trap plants, whereas molasses grass and silver desmodium repel ovipositing stem borers. Molasses grass, when intercropped with maize, not only reduces infestation of the maize by stem borers, but also increase stem borer parasitism by a natural enemy, Costacia sesami. So they can also promote natural enemies in the system. And the desmodium, when intercropped with maize, inhibits striker. So it's quite a system which can reduce pests. Still on this push-pull strategy, in Murewa we have used the maize, I think maize and the desmodium intercrop, which is also surrounded by napier. And it appears that the system also reduces fall armyworm. In fact, the number of fall armyworm were being reduced significantly across 3 agroecological regions. So this push and pull strategy is also being evaluated for its effectiveness in controlling particularly the fall armyworm. I think the farmers were also using a certain type of bean which they thought could also drive away the fall armyworm. But desmodium seems to do a great job. It's also a study being done by one of the PhD students in Murewa and Mutoko. In conclusion, we can say that there is no single pest control tactic which is relied on in IPM systems. We just have to integrate various methods. Pesticides are used only when needed in relation to economic thresholds. So it is the economic thresholds which will decide for us whether we are going to use the pesticide or not. And it is important to use them judiciously. Use them at the recommended rates from the manufacturer. There are opportunities to design and exploit IPM strategies to control pests in Zimbabwe, like what is also being now done. I think Dr. Mark Roberts of Bukushi Seeds is also trying this push-pull system in one of the areas. And we have got an undergraduate who was working with Dr. Mark Roberts, who has collected data. We are going to see what is going to come out of it, because I'm also supervising that student. So it will be interesting to see what, because the push-pull technology in Dr. Mark Roberts' experiments, he is comparing it with the pesticides. So we are going to see how efficient this system is. So I think this is it. This is the end. This is the end of this lecture. I will have to stop.